Lately, I have found myself in a set of circumstances where I have felt a little bit stuck. Bit of personal conversation here as we get started today. Not really in a bad way. Things are awesome. Family is great and friends are great. And I love doing this. I got other fun, meaningful things going on in my life. But every now and then over the course of my life, I've just had a handful of things, opportunities, challenges, stuff where I'm not in control and just kind of have to wait and see. And when they all happen in a big bunch, it's like when you don't open the bag of cereal quite enough and then all of the Captain Crunch jams into the little opening in the bag you made and it's just too much. Then you know that gravity means it all wants to get moving, but you just got to get it unstuck a little bit and maybe open that bag a little bit more, but that doesn't fit into the analogy, so ignore that part. I have been in that kind of situation where I'm like, all right, I got a little bit of a log jam here, and it's not really bad. I gotta pull on a few of these logs, and once I get one or two of them moving, then everything else is going to move in the natural direction it needs to move, and it's going to be awesome. I feel like Esther is stuck in the middle of this book that we're looking at. I do not see her as a character who has distinguished herself as being exceptionally noble or honest or of great character yet in this book, but I also haven't seen her be bad. She's just unwritten at this point. And there's a whole lot of stuff beyond her control that has been happening. In fact, almost everything in her life, save a few moves that she made shrewdly to win that contest, has been out of her control. Remember when we were looking at chapter 2 and all of that passive voice language? Then this happened to her, then this was done to her, then she's taken here, then this happens. And if we just set aside most of the rest of the story and the big things going on, and we just look at her life from her perspective as we get toward the end of Esther chapter 4, what we see is the lady who's just stuck. There's just a whole lot of things going on, most of which have been inflicted on her, and she needs to get unstuck. And that unsticking is going to be pretty fateful. It's going to determine a lot about who she turns out to be. It's going to determine a lot about the fate of the Persian Empire and the reign of King Xerxes, her husband. And it's also going to be massively deterministic for the fate of the Jewish people and for God's redemptive plan. Mordecai, as we've talked about for the last couple of days, is someone who is also a little bit character ambiguous at this point in the story, but he's important because he's an agitator, he's a mover and a shaker, and metaphorically speaking, he's banging and yanking on the log jam that is going on in Esther's situation, trying to get things worked loose so that something will happen. Now, some of us might read how Mordecai goes about this and find it a little bit distasteful, because in one moment he's saying stuff like, don't think that you and your household will escape this. That, to me, is pretty clearly a not even very veiled threat to reveal her ethnic identity as being a member of this group that is marked for death by the edict of her husband. But then, like 2 sentences later in verse, 14, he flips around and he says, and who knows but that you have come to royal position for such a time as this. So now he's yanking on another one of the logs in her log jam that has her all stuck. But this one is in a positive way. He's trying to cast a vision for her destiny, her reason for existing. I mean, buried within that comment from Mordecai are some serious existential questions for Esther to consider. Hey, do you think you were maybe made for more than this? Do you think maybe you have a role that is more significant than being someone who shows up for the king when he happens to remember you every few months when he gets bored? Do you want to get to the end of your life and you're laying on your perfumed deathbed, looking back on things, and there are no other Jews, no ethnic brothers or sisters left because you didn't do anything and they all died, but you lived out your days in comfort? Does that sound good? Instead, what we see Mordecai doing is grabbing onto that same idea, that same concept that Haman grabbed onto a chapter earlier, fate. There's an appeal here to destiny, to something that is bigger. Now, I know a lot of people who are much smarter than me and much better at the Bible than me. They look at these passages and they see Mordecai using veiled religious language, demonstrating a deep well of faith. Well, if that's the case, nobody else who has a deep well of faith so carefully and meticulously avoids mentioning God or faith as Mordecai does in the entire Old Testament, but maybe they see something I don't see here. What I'm seeing is a flawed character who is using every means necessary to break up the logjam that is causing Esther to be paralyzed, immobilized, unable, unwilling to act when she is the best positioned person to solve this looming crisis. Some of what Mordecai is going to bang on is going to be the part of the logjam that is negative. Here's the pain point. People will find out you're Jewish. You will get it too. But here's the promise point, Esther. Maybe you have a bigger purpose than just about anybody else who's around here right now. Maybe even though you have this illustrious title of queen, you still feel like a nobody and like you have nothing to contribute to this. But maybe you're the most important human character in this whole story. Maybe the whole reason you won that contest and everything worked out the way it did was so that in some grand sense of fate or providence, you could be right here. Well, you can picture this sequence in a movie or in a book. The main character hears that stuff from a mentor or feels this pressure applied, and they go and they reflect. And then there's this moment of choosing, this moment of resolution in which they go from staring wistfully off into the distance, reflecting on their circumstances, to straightening up and looking ahead confidently and with resolution, knowing what it is that they have to do. And now the protagonist, the main character, the hero to be, is activated. And in that moment, in that kind of story where the hero begins to rise, you don't really sit around and think much anymore about the means by which it happened. You don't really go back and be like, yeah, but that was bad and that was bad and that was good. You just say, well, circumstances, or in our case, the providence of God, brought the main character online, activated the main character, and now she has made a fateful decision in the ether. She had a 1 or a 0. 0 represents I'm going to do nothing and I'm going to let this play out. 1 represents I'm going to risk it all and try to do something about it using my position of access and power to see if I can be a part of saving it all. Now, whenever you see these sequences in a movie or read about these things in a book, there's a certain level of busyness and action, where oftentimes the hero will start barking out orders and pointing at things, and they take charge of the situation. And that's exactly what we get from Esther at the end of chapter 4. She's reflected on this whole exchange. She's made her decision. And then in verse 15, it says, "Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Don't eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it's against the law. And if I perish, I perish." Dang, that worked on me. I just had a physiological response. I got the goosebumps going, and I totally already knew what was coming. What a wonderful moment. What a wonderful pivot point in this story. What a powerful encouragement that goes beyond the boundaries of this ancient book and all the way up till right now. A powerful encouragement to anybody who is stuck, to anybody who might feel like they don't have much to offer, like they're in a position of weakness and insignificance, or things aren't turning out the way they want. But when faced with a moment of challenge, an opportunity to do something that is brave and right and good, this can be what that moment of resolution looks like. If Esther could muster this kind of courage and decisiveness in this difficult situation, then who knows, maybe you or I could muster that kind of decisiveness, that kind of courage under great pressure, under great duress, under the most difficult circumstances in our lives as well. I think it's powerful. We'll talk more about exactly what her instructions were and how Mordecai responds next time around. I'm Matt. It's the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.
This podcast exists because many of you kick in to make it happen, even though you don't have to. Learn more at thetmbh.com/support.